Welcome to this video on moving from inspect and reject to predict and prevent. Most manufacturing plants hold weekly or monthly production meetings, where they review productivity and waste. Obviously, these reports do not allow them to change what's happened in the past, yet in most cases, they also provide very little insight into how to change the future. Many are stuck in a paradigm of inspect and reject. This video focuses on companies that have switched their paradigm from inspect and reject to predict and prevent, using a holistic approach to real-time analytics. Too often, we think of our databases as if they are vaults. We store information in them and then withdraw it when we need to produce reports. Frequently, this is a laborious and time-consuming process, and by the time we review the report, the data are already becoming stale. But a database can be more like a garden, where if set up and cultivated correctly, it will produce valuable, actionable information when we really need to consume it, and while it's still fresh. This is the story of real-time analytics. When analytics are applied in real time, your entire perspective changes, and your data begin to produce valuable knowledge. You can think of it this way. When your data are green, they grow, but when they are ripe, they tend to rot over time. Companies have been using real-time dashboards to monitor their plants for years, but in most cases they use simple trend charts and only alarm on fixed limits. If information is monitored by analytics at all, it's usually from a single silo of information in an individual database. Many plant operators are flooded with alarms on production line consoles and control room displays. Frequently, these signals are just ignored. But some companies are beginning to address the problem. Before DuPont began to address their alarm situation, they surveyed their plants and found they were experiencing 150,000 alarms going off per week. Without analytics, these real-time dashboards are like gardens full of weeds. Showing excessive alarms without statistical relevance to operators can be very detrimental for three reasons. First, operators may see something and take action when there's nothing really wrong. People are amazingly good at finding meaning in data when no meaning really exists. And with this new world of big data, we are filling our plants with more and more sensors and capturing more and more data. We should expect to find more and more false positives. Just as if you look at enough rocks, you're bound to find something that looks like something you recognize, such as a bald eagle. The problem is that some people will react immediately, others will think about it for a while and then react, and others will never even notice. Is this any way to run a plant? Second, people tend to find correlations in data even when no relationship actually exists. This is where plant folklore comes from, and what Carl Jung termed synchronicity. At one point in time, something bad happened in a plant, and some other data happened to be trending closely. When the principal caught the two together, they became part of plant knowledge, even though no statistical correlation actually ever existed. 3. Placing more and more alarms in front of operators will also cause them to be more likely to overlook the critical alarms in the sea of noise. Knowing which alarms to pay attention to when 150,000 alarms are going off per week would actually be quite a challenge. We need to filter out the noise and focus on significance.
Return on investment comes from many different places, and one of the places where we weren't expecting it was the ability to use the NWA products to remove a step in our process. There was some institutional knowledge that there was a correlation between a product measurement and product quality. And I was able to use the NWA products to show that there was no correlation between that measurement and downstream product quality. So we were able to cut that step out of our process completely. So that turns into increased throughput, less data collection, and less space on our systems to have to store this data that really had no value.
Now let's talk about big data and manufacturing intelligence. Manufacturing plants are used to working with many specialized databases, ERP systems, MES systems, which are now being called MOM, DCS, or distributed control systems, quality systems, laboratory information management systems, process historians to capture more process data. Manufacturing intelligence software allows companies to analyze the most important parameters no matter where the data are located. The traditional method for doing this has been to copy data from each of the individual databases into one of the other databases. Frequently, people choose the ERP system or the historian. This method has several challenges. For one, replicated data tends to deviate over time as corrections and adjustments end up creating two versions of the data. Additionally, these are not trivial projects and usually take years to implement and extreme cost. By the time the data are ready to be analyzed, the data analyst may have already retired, and not just for the day. Finally, these databases store information in very different formats, and whether a company has 5, 50, or 500 plants, no two seem to be at the same level of automation, measure the same variables, and in many cases, even make the same products. So the projects frequently become colossal in nature, but there is a better way. Focus CMI allows companies to analyze their data in real time without copying the data into yet another separate database. The software pulls appropriate data, runs calculations, and produces real-time analytic-based alarming. Using this technology, companies have achieved meaningful results very quickly. Here, Mary Beth Seacholtz and Lloyd Colgrove from Dow Chemical will talk about their experiences in choosing and implementing Focus CMI real-time analytics.
You need to have representatives from both the manufacturing side that see how the plant behaves and is changing on a daily basis, but you also need a technical staff that is well versed in fundamental behaviors of chemical processes. You need both of them because neither is right, and so you need to meet in the middle kind of, because no calculation is necessarily perfect, but short-term views of the process, which is what the plant usually has, they're not perfect either.
We want the data systems to generate the data. We want the control systems to do the control. We simply want a process that is very good to go into these data systems and into these process control loops to take a look at the information that it's seeing and help us make sense for it.
One of the things that we wanted to accomplish with the use of this dashboard was to expose people to the data. But we wanted it to be in a very clean, seamless sort of way. If you have data duplicated, let's say from the MES server of the plant, and then you make a copy of it and you put it somewhere, there always will be questions about the accuracy of the data, and were changes made to the data, and well, which copy of which data did you have? And so a very good practice when it comes to databases is to have the data only be in one location, and then when you need to look at it, you pull it, and you might pull data from several locations together. That's one of the features of the dashboard, but it still stays resident, and there is only one copy of it back in the manufacturing environment.
It's very cost effective because we're already generating the data. We're already spending the money on the infrastructure for the data. Why would we spend all that money and not look at the data in a new and better way?
One success story that has come out that I've really been happy about because it really shows the change of culture that we had is recently a plant started, the catalyst started really dying off, and nobody really quite knew why. And it turned out that there was some impurities in the raw material that were not checked for because they're typically not there, but that are quite damaging to the catalyst. And so in the past, the environment would have been pointing fingers at the purchasing folks saying, you bought that bad raw material and don't ever do that again. But what took place this time was, well, we need to put some new analytical tests in place so we can have them right up on the dashboard right away and make that part of the specification for the raw materials. And, oh, by the way, if this ever really does happen again, how can we run the plant in a way that will minimize the damage that these impurities would cause? And so that culture shift away from purchasing, get your act together, to, well, if this happens again, how can we monitor for it, and how can we run the plant in a more successful way until the impurities work themselves out? That's a real culture change that we had.
Mary Beth's last comment really highlights a company that's moved from inspect and reject to predict and prevent. And not just by the technology, but the whole company culture has actually shifted too. This is very powerful. The project in this plant was evaluated over a 1-year time frame. When the real-time analytic view was displayed to the team for the first time, one of the members asked if the view was live or a prototype data. When he was told it was live, he remarked that the plant was just ignoring one of the key parameters that he'd been talking to them about for years. He immediately emailed the plant after the meeting. A week later, the group met again, and everyone could see that the adjustment was made right after the previous meeting, but also that the plant had come more into control as a result. The real-time analytic view had also generated many conversations among the team members, as certain situations required actions which required compromises. They might need to adjust one variable, but only for a short period of time, and while they did that, they need to adjust 2 other variables. But the net result was that during the pilot, the plant had the longest catalyst run ever, both in terms of time and product generated, and they were able to save millions of dollars almost immediately. Thank you for listening to this presentation.